In this lesson, we're going to learn about C-axis drilling. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create a drilling operation off the axis of revolution. In Fusion 360, we want to get started with the dataset C-axis drilling.f3d. We should be in the manufacturer workspace, and we should be set to inch. This already has a setup in stock, so we're going to take a look at this for C-axis drilling. We already have taken a look at drilling along the axis of rotation, and that's how a majority of standard lathes will operate. You can put a drill inside of a chuck, and you can use the spindle turning to actually use a fixed drill bit to drill the hole in the center. However, when we start moving off of the center, we're using C-axis operations, and we need to incorporate live tooling. Let's go ahead and check the tool library for this document and see what tools we have available. We have a 1/2 inch drill. We have a .201, which is a drill size for a 1/4 20 tap. We have a 1/4 20 tap, and then we have a 1/4 inch flat end mill. So we have all the tools that we need for this, but we can always use inspect and just double check the size of the holes. So that's a 201, and the center should be a 1/2 inch, and then the 1/4 inch end mill will be used for these small pockets. So what we want to do now that we already understand how to create a drilling operation on the axis of rotation, we're going to use drilling operations, but we're going to do it off the axis of rotation. We're going to select our tool from our document, which is going to be our .201. Again, we're skipping pre-drilling the holes and we're just using the correct drill bit sizes, but in reality, you would spot drill all these positions first. Now that we have our tool selected, notice that the spindle RPM is going to be set here, and that's going to be used in a live tooling situation. So this is where you have some sort of tool holder setup that allows you to spin the tools. So we're going to be spinning this drill using live tooling, and the part itself will not be rotating. We'll be using the spindle to position it, and then we'll be using the live tooling to actually spin our drill bit. Now that we have our geometry section, we want to select at least one of the holes. What we can do here is we can select one hole and we can pattern it, or we can manually select each of the holes that we want to drill. There are different reasons why you would choose one over the other. If the drills are in a concentric pattern, we can use either option, it'll be fine. But in some instances, you might not have a traditional pattern that you can do, and you might want to select all the holes. Of course, all the same options that we have in a milling setup, selecting the same diameter, auto merging hole segments, and so on, these all will allow us to make that same selection in the lathe situation. Then we want to determine the heights. Now, because we selected the faces of each hole, the heights are already based on the hole top and bottom. That's going to be fine for this. I am going to use drill tip through bottom. This is going to allow me to have a little bit of extra material removed from the bottom of the hole because we are going to be tapping them. And then the drilling cycle, I'm going to be using a partial retract. So this is going to be a PEX cycle that allows me to pull the drill bit back out a little bit, help with chip clearance, but ultimately what's actually happening is it's not fully retracting until the hole is completely drilled. So we're going to say, okay, allow it to generate that, and then I'm going to take a look at simulation. So as we're simulating, we can see that the drill is pecking in each position and then it's moving over to the next. This is a great situation because it's coming all the way back around. And what we can actually do is we can take this toolpath and we can duplicate it, and then we can modify the duplicate to be our tapping operation. So I'm going to edit this starting with the tool. Now we're going to select our 1/4 20 tap. The holes are already going to be selected, but we can reverse the order, which means that what we're doing is we're going to the last position we drilled and we're working our way back. So that means that the spindle on our machine is going to index based on moving back and forth. Now, there are some situations where you would want to be aware of the method that we're doing here. If you don't have great repeatability in the spindle that you're using, you might want to drill and tap each hole position before moving to the next. Hopefully that's not an issue, but there are certain instances where you might want to consider drilling and tapping each position and then patterning that entire thing or redoing all of those operations. Next, the heights. Because we use that drill tip through bottom on the previous operation, I'm going to allow it to go all the way to the whole bottom, knowing that we have a small amount of clearance. Then for the cycle, because we did duplicate it, we will have to manually select tapping because it won't automatically change based on our tool selection. So that is one downside when we're duplicating a drilling operation, moving it to a tapping operation. We need to double check that tapping cycle or else you will break a tap extremely fast. So now that we have our tapping cycle in each position, let's select the entire setup and let's simulate. So now as we're going through, we're drilling each position, moving in a clockwise manner. Once we get to that last hole position and we switch to a tap, now we're moving backwards in a counterclockwise fashion. Now again, we don't necessarily need to do that, but based on the pre-selected holes, because we duplicated that operation, it was easy for us to just reverse it. Otherwise, it's going to move to this position and then work its way back around. Either will be fine. It's not a huge amount of distance to go between the two, but if you don't have to reposition the spindle, then it's best to just keep it in the same location between operations. From here, let's always make sure that we do save often before moving on to the next step.